session. I will introduce both our speakers, and Tate Mabule Mokhine will begin and will be followed by Mama Tebogo Buntu. To introduce the speakers, I'll start with Tate Mokhine. He is a mathematics and science tutor whose approach builds from an appreciative inquiry that is vested in helping learners understand the concept from a human and intuitive experience. He is one of the custodians at the Greenhouse Project, a walking demonstration and information center on environmental sustainability and sustainable living practices for community and home enterprises. In his praxis, Elder Mokhine draws from the Black Conscious and Pan-African school of thought. Thus, he plays the role of a group process facilitator at several Black Consciousness and Pan-Africanist community organizations, amongst which are Mpahlalatsene e-learning program and Black House Collective, as well as Ebukhosini Solutions. Mama Tebogo Buntu is a community educator and practitioner within African-centered knowledge and healing. She is a director of Ebukhosini Solution, a Johannesburg-based company specializing in Pan-African education, environment, and transformation. In the company, she coordinates learning journeys, seminars, workshops, ceremonies, and engagements focusing on African identity, self-development, holistic living, conflict resolution, generational trauma counseling, and awakening people's intuitive. Mama Tebogo is also the founder of Kandaga, a women's initiative, which is a platform for African women dialogues for awakening divine femininity. Welcome, our guests. Thank you, Mama Tebogo. Thank you, Ntate Mokhine, for joining us today and for being willing to share from your experiences in your decolonial travels within the community, and also what you've learned throughout the years in your praxis in relating to today's theme. Welcome to the space. Ntate Mokhine, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mbali, and greetings to everyone. I'm humbled by the invitation, and I'll try to, honor the invitation from my own lived experiences on the theme, decoloniality of being, land, life, and nature. As introduced, my background is mathematics and science, which I still continue to do, through tutoring, from grades 8 to first and second year science and engineering students. How I come to decoloniality of being, land, life, and nature through the greenhouse is a 30-year journey. That starts first with, an awareness, a moment of awareness while I was still a student at the University of Cape Town, and realizing that, mathematics can be quite a siloed, practice. And in the same token, there was a demand, from local students. Back then, we used to refer to them as students, especially when you're in high school from grade 10. We are referred to as a student. It's only post-1994 that we talk of learners up to grade 12, grade 10. The demand was, for a number of learners in Nyanga who needed assistance with mathematics and science. And that's how I get drawn to the space of community engagement on the backdrop of, that moment of how siloed community, mathematics.
Sorry, there's someone who has their mic on. Travelers, please mute yourself to give Ntate Mokhine the platform to be able to speak without disturbance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mbali. So that was my first introduction of, crossing, the divide between academia and community. When I responded with, a few colleagues who were studying, science and mathematics at UCT with, when we reached out to the learners at Nyanga, we then realized, the disparities that were inherent, in the communities insofar as, material conditions. Not that one was not aware of the material conditions, but how they impacted learning and an appreciation of mathematics, and therefore an inquiry into the teaching of mathematics. And that took one to exploring further on the science of mathematics. And it was quite interesting that mathematics, just like any human practice, once it is named, it can be removed from the daily lived experience, of the practice. For example, the science of numbers it's inherent in every living human being. But once it's framed as mathematics, and this is where coloniality comes in, because once it's framed as mathematics, it's often framed outside of the lived experience of, daily lived experience of a people. For example, we quantify, from time, how much, of the things that we use, in the house. So quantification is an inherent, practice, inherent and almost like intuitive, practice, of mathematics. But where it becomes quite interesting is in the search, then you discover that there were, in fact, daily practices that centered people on an appreciation of, the intuitive, inherent, practice of quantification and numbers. And one of which was the discovery of, well, it was my own research and my own discovery of Murabaraba. I don't know how many people are aware of Murabaraba. That Murabaraba basically, it's a numbers game. Yes, there is strategy. So, with one's understanding of how numbers work, one can actually innovate, strategies and counter strategies when playing with, another person. And that didn't take me long, and led me to, an even more deeper appreciation of mathematics as a science, as a practice, with the geometry, and the alignment of the pyramids, in Kemet to the Orion Belt. And that for me was quite profound. Just to learn that, there is the Rhine, the papyrus, papers. One, it's the Moscow papyrus and the Rhine papyrus, which actually detail much of what we now take for, for some of us who are in the mathematics, field, or we take, notions like algebra, trigonometry, geometry, including calculus, for granted. But these were, were formalized, daily lived, applications of mathematics in societies that founded the high culture, spiritual civilization that was Kemet. And this can also be traced across the globe, the Indus Valley civilization that was founded by the Dravidians, who have since been suppressed, through the case system, and then the Black Chinese, who founded much of the what we now celebrate as the Chinese civilization. I'm not sure if I'm still alive. Am I still connected? I'm getting something here. Okay,
Yes, you're still connected, Tate.
Okay, that's just ignore what I'm seeing on my screen. So the inquiry into the teaching of mathematics, given a sudden, realization of the disparities, including how they were impacting on the appreciation of mathematics as an inherent and intuitive, daily lived, human experience around what we would call numbers. It led one to, have to innovate around how can one then, facilitate the teaching of mathematics in such a way that it inspires an appreciation of mathematics as a science of practice, as a science that is intuitive, that numbers are inherently intuitive to, human experience, on a daily basis, especially against the historical findings that one, came across. And in that moment, I then began to be drawn to, and this was because of, I still carried through the awareness of how siloed one can be as a maths practitioner, and of course as a science practitioner, removed from the daily lived realities of, and I think that's what decoloniality speaks to. How do we break down these walls that keeps us in silos, removed from, the human experience of being alive, being connected with nature, being one with the land, and just being. And then I was drawn to, a piece of work which initially started just as a piece of work, and it was out of curiosity, with Earthlife Africa, on environmental justice, environmental sustainability and social justice. And my stint with Earthlife Africa was rather peculiar in that, the first thing that I, felt challenged by was, acknowledging that Earthlife Africa's work was particularly important, very relevant, and however, it was still not, in touch with where the majority of South Africans across race, gender, ethnicity, religious affiliation, or even, just spiritual, consciousness, around policy, advocacy for policy and legislation that is related to environmental sustainability. Now, this is very interesting because it points to exactly what colonization had had influenced society over the 350 years, since 1652, and some people actually stretch it to 1510, and there's historical basis for stretching it back to 1510. I will not belabor that much, except just to point out that, your Bartholomew Dias and Vasco da Gama, they actually were the first explorers that landed on the shores of what we now call South Africa, and that was way before 1652. But having said that, the disconnect between, people, nature, and life, insofar as environmental policy and legislation was concerned, became an interesting area that challenged me. And it became interesting because, one, while Earthlife work still remains relevant, it still remained disconnected, from reaching people where they are. Why? Because over the 350 years of colonial, hegemony and oppression, dispossession, exploitation, dehumanization, people had become far removed from, being connected with the essence of being one with nature and being alive. And so, work on policy and advocacy needed a connection, a reconnection, with where people were. And that led me to, doing some work. Once again, I was trying to find a bridge between the relevance of policy and advocacy around, of advocacy on policy and legislation around environmental sustainability and social justice, with where it mattered most, which is where people are. An interesting moment of awareness that hit me flat there was that not only were our people across race, gender, and spiritual consciousness, including religious affiliation, were disconnected from the essence of being. But quite a number of, communities in the townships the word community was just in reference. There was no common vision. There was no, collective organization. There was no communal purpose. So in essence, people had been so disorganized over the 350 years that they couldn't, it had become, it had become just, in reference, to refer to people as communities. And that moment was particularly interesting for me because suddenly I realized that people living in the same area um, do not necessarily share a common vision, a common purpose, and therefore a common system of social organization to respond to some of these dislocations, including, our dislocation from nature, and hence the relevance of advocacy on policy and legislation related to environmental sustainability and social justice. And this piece of work then set me off on a pilot project with a community-based organization that I, championed with a few fellows. We used to call it URI, until someone said, no, we need to call it Injia Uri to locate it within the, Pan-Africanist, worldview, which Injia, is Injia is basically the way, it's Kiswahili for the way. And Uri, it's the indigenous name for the river that we now call Jackskane. So the metaphor embedded in the name was that a river, always finds the easiest way around obstacles. And our approach was, how do we find the easiest way to re-inspire, self-awareness towards self-determination and self-reliance amongst our people, so that they're able to engage with what is relevant and is of essence, for our well-being, economically, environmentally, and socially. Of course, one wasn't negating the power relations and dynamics embedded, across, the social, economic, and environmental, because there's always been power dynamics, which is why, we had inherited more than 350 years of dislocation from our essence of being as a people from nature and land, and as a result, being alive. Being alive has up to then been qualified, through capitalist modes of production, one being not really being able to sell their labor, because labor was inscripted into exploitation. Again, adversarial power dynamics that spoke to dislocation and dispossession, including systemic dehumanization. And then gradually, that piece of work, in as much as it illuminated, an awareness of how people living in the same, area or location were not necessarily, a community, because there wasn't a shared vision, a shared purpose, and therefore, a drive, to self-organize towards self-determination and self-reliance, then took me to, piloting a community-based neighborhood recycling program. But that had to be linked with, policy developments in support of, environmental sustainability, insofar as, human activity impacts adversarially on land, water, and air, with waste, generation. And so I, through Earth Life, I was, a participant in the integrated waste management pilot project, which ran for about 12 months, and the purpose of which was to actually model, a community-based, recycling initiative. And this became quite an interesting, albeit jarring experience, because over the 12 years of our engagement with, national government, back then it was the Department of Environment and Tourism. I think it was Department of Environment and Tourism. We interacted with corporate South Africa government, and we were coming in as civil society. At the very tail end of this pilot phase of, modeling a community-based sustainable recycling program, it was quite disheartening to hear, corporate South Africa, who in essence were largely the manufacturers of, packaging materials. So that would be, and I hope Chatham House rule applies. Mondi, Sapi, Nampec, and Consol, saying to, government, no, you can leave recycling to us, we can run with it. And when the two of us who were, participating there as, civil society reps, sought to point out that that would be a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest in the sense that, these corporations were largely designated for manufacturing, and now they wanted to play into the space of waste management. And waste management was a designated area of responsibility for government, and that they had throughout, the 12-month period, been pushing back on extended producer responsibility. And some of the arguments that they were, using were quite, disingenuous. For example, for those of us who grew, in the era before packaging took the form of plastic, be it plastic bottles and plastic carry bags, there was always a deposit, particularly on your glass containers. And the deposit, basically, you pay the deposit for the first time purchase of, whether it's milk or it's a beverage, in a glass container. And when you had no need for the container, you could take back the container, to the manufacturer, and therefore reclaim your deposit. That system worked perfectly fine, and extended producer responsibility was nothing else but, a
do you need a
kindly
minute?
of that ethos, of material use. Yes, a minute will be fine.
Okay.
So to sum up this journey, for me, decolonial, from my experience, decoloniality of being life, land life, and nature speaks very much to praxis, And one of the things that colonialism and colonial education has done is to actually shift a lot of information, to theoretical frameworks, and not linking theoretical frameworks with praxis. Whereas the daily lived experience of the people is that we experience and therefore shape theory, whereas the colonial education has actually flipped, the process the other way around. And just to bottom it down, there is a need, for decentralized economies, so that people could actually, decolonize their being, including their connection and relations with land, and reclaim their life and reconnect with nature around food, around decentralized energy generation systems. And I know that a lot of people are talking about renewable energy, but so long as it's still centralized, it's still, disabling people from being active participants in the energy economy. So it's also with water, we can decentralize our water supplies to rainwater harvesting so that people reconnect with their use and the essence of water from their own domiciles. And that is not to say, rainwater harvesting should not be supplemented with bulk water supplies. And then finally, that we need to revisit, theory and praxis. And my take is that we need, praxis in order to generate theory rather than the other way around. On that note, thanks, Mbali.
Thank you, Ntate, for sharing your journey in decoloniality and also the different works that you've done around. Yes, can you please give Ntate a round of applause, everyone? Ntate has shared with us the different ways in which he has practiced in decolonial uh, being a decolonial practitioner as a mathematician, teaching children or teaching students uh, who come from communities where their being and existence is not affirmed, to say you are engaging with mathematics on a daily basis. You are engaging with numbers in your ways of being, and bringing that into the education system, then as a student himself and now as a mathematics tutor, and the work that you are doing that they in advocacy and legislation and environmental sustainability at the Greenhouse Project, bringing about consciousness to the community, to surrounding communities about what nature is, what it represents, and how we can work around it to, have self-reliance and cultivate that connection with nature. Thank you, Tate. We will open. I know a number of people are texting me on WhatsApp saying they have questions. We will open for questions after Mama Tebogo has also given us what she has prepared for us this afternoon. Mama Tebogo?
Greetings, 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 everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. I won't keep my camera on because my network is a little bit not strong, but I will make sure that I engage with everyone behind the scene. So thank you so much, Mbali. Thank you for UNISA and for the department for inviting me. In today's presentation, I will look at on coloniality of being, land, life, and nature. I will look at on the issue of healing the land, and some of the questions that I was just thinking about, just working on this presentation and sharing with the travelers, with the community. One of the things that was coming most strongly for me was like questions like, really, what is the land? Do we really understand what the land is, and what the land represent to us, and what is healing? If we are saying that we are healing the land, what is healing? What is healing means as individual, as a collective, and even healing to the land? And what is healing the land, and how we lost the land, as African people, and what we have become by losing the land. What have we become after that? How are we like right now? How do we look like after losing the land? And even what the land used to represent, and what the land
Mama Tebogo, are you still here with us?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. I will start my presentation here on healing the land by saying that we are sick because the land is sick. So where we find ourselves right now in our society, we are sick because the land is sick. And therefore, it is important that we heal the land. The land the land, as we know it, is not separated from us as people. The land represents us, and we represent the land. There are different African mythologies that serves to remind us to reconnect, to understand the connection that we as people we have with the land. And one of the classic mythology of ancient Kemet, or what is known today as Egypt, is that the representative of God on earth, there is a representative of God on earth, which is known as Geb, and in the Nguni language is Umhlaba, Lefatshe. So Geb as a physical body that we possess, also the earth plane that where things are tangible, is also a plane where things are tangible and intangible. So we as physical, we as the physical body, we are the representative of God on earth. Taking care of the land on earth is taking care of God. Therefore, we cannot claim to love God and we are disconnected with the land. Loving the land, loving life and nature is loving God. We should, when we deal with these issues, we should always work on also understanding our own worldview, our own cosmology on issues of the land and how to heal it. Failure to do that is one of the challenges that even when we are tackling different problems that we are having, we get confused because our worldview are already being skewed. What is the land? The land is defined as a solid surface of earth, including everything that is found on it and beneath it, such as soil, rocks, mineral, water bodies like rivers and lakes, vegetation, forest, grassland, and crops, and many human-made structures such as buildings and roads that are fixed on the ground. Land is one of the 4 primary natural resources along with air, water, mineral, and it's playing a crucial role in supporting various ecosystems and human activity. So what is that role that when we talk about the land, and we talked about what the land is, but what is that function or the role of the land? The land serves as a function including providing a habitat for living organisms, serving as a source of natural resources like food, minerals, and offering recreational and cultural opportunity. So the land represent all the natural resources, the food that we eat, the minerals, and therefore because it represents all those part of the natural resources, it is important that we always have that reconnection with it so that we take care of it so that it can take care of us. And as part of decoloniality, part of the studies, we know that one of the reasons why we need a particular approach to understanding is because we know that for the longest time we have been given one perspective of understanding, and therefore when we are tackling issues, we always have to go back to who we are as people so that we ask the questions about the issues that are in front of us that are our challenge. For example, on these issues of land, we will look at what is an African view of land. The African view of land is a diverse and complex, and it's complex as the continent is the home of a wide range of cultures, tradition, and belief system. African perspectives on land are deeply rooted in history, customs, spirituality of various communities across the continent. While it's important to recognize that there is no single African perspective on land, as views can vary widely among different ethnic groups and regions, there are some common themes and principles that are understood from that that are understood what the land represents. There's a collective ownership. In many African society, land is often seen as a communal or collective asset rather than an individual one. And this one is challenging because even right now, because we have lost this connection with the land for such a long time, as Mabule has been stating, almost 300 years and more. We have now also taken this approach of when we think of the land, when we think of getting our land back, we are also even thinking it on an individual approach, no longer in a collective approach. Within the African worldview, the land is typically owned by community-owned land, and access to land is often governed by customary rules and tradition. Individual ownership of land, as it's understood in Western legal system, may not align with traditional notion of the land. You know, on this one, it just reminded me of one trip that I once took to. Those who know this place in South Africa, in Mpumalanga, Sudwala Caves. You know, when we were sitting there looking at the cave, to start with, even that cave, just to see it as a natural resource that has always been there, that our people have been using it for different things, for hiding there when there was wars, for rituals, for so many purposes. Then later on, during the apartheid time, it was been taken by this white people that right now they are owners of that cave. So we were sitting there looking, sitting with some of those owners of the cave. And you just hear someone saying that, you know, this mountain from this side to this side, it's mine. And this side to that side, it's my cousin. And for me, what was saddening about that not even saying that you are with us here, but you still have the arrogance of talking about the land that we knew that how it was taken from our indigenous people. You still talk about it as yours if you are even breaking to us. And with that understanding that there's no way that an individual can own the land. The land, it is owned by the collective. Also, another African view on what is the land is spiritual and cultural significance. Land holds deep spiritual and cultural significance for many African communities. It is often associated with ancestral connection and is considered a source of identity and heritage. Rituals and ceremonies related to land are common, and land is sometimes considered sacred. And I will also even post to everyone there, those who knows that, if you still remember any rituals that you have heard your parents talk about, share with us in a group there that different rituals that you know that are being used to make sure that they are connecting with the land. And for those who know, who understand the sacredness and the connection that our people have with the land, that is why even in their prayers, they were always looking at the spirit of the mountains, the spirit of the river, the spirit of the forest, and the spirit of the cave. And that it is the acknowledgement of knowing that we cannot just come into the land and do as we please. We always have to remember the importance of going into these places because they are sacred. In Setswana, they say, Badimo badi taba, Badimo badi noka, Badimo badi kwa, le Badimo ba magaga. Another worldview is sustainability and stewardship. Many African cultures has a long history of sustainable land management practices. Traditional ecological knowledge and farming techniques have been passed down through generation, emphasizing the importance of preserving the land for future generation. We do not own the land, we preserve it for the future. We should remember this. This call even for us today. When we are fighting for the land, we should use our understanding and worldview what the land is, or else we will repeat the same colonial approach of owning and dominating the land. Land also, in our view, in the African view, was also used for conflict and dispute. Land disputes are not uncommon in Africa after arising from changes in land tenure system, population growth, and urbanization. These conflicts can be complex, involving competing claims based on custom, legal system, and historical use. We see this happening a lot in villages right now, where we see some of the traditional leaders that are taking piece of land and use it for their own interest and not making sure that they're protecting the land for the benefit of the community. Land as a resource, or also there is a land as a resource of livelihood. In many African countries, agriculture remains a primary source of livelihood for a significant portion of the population. Access to land is critical for subsistence farming and economic survival. And right now we are struggling with that. Even the issue of scarcity of food, it stems from this issue of us not owning the land anymore. We depend on the economic survival of farming. That in most cases they are still controlling what we eat, the food that we eat. We still need to make sure that we connect back with the land so that we can be in charge of the food that we consume. Also, another part that I would like to go into is that issue of how did we disconnected with the land. I think it has already been mentioned several times in this platform. But what I want to input on is that a colonization in Africa and apartheid in Tanzania contributed for us being disconnected with the land. The after effects of that disconnect are multi-layered. The disconnect is physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritual. We have lost the sense of direction of what we should be doing, when, where, and how. And I'm happy that what Sisimbali was just talking about. Right now, we have this confusion of, even when people hearing that this is an African New Year, we are so confused. And we are so confused with even understanding what time it is for ourselves, because we lost the understanding of connecting with the land, not only land, with the cosmos, so that it can guide us to know within the land and the space that we are, what is going on, what we're supposed to be doing. The same thing happened with the issue of African agricultural calendar. We are now in the confusing time, and that confusion started when the land was removed from us. We got detached. We got detached to the point that the confusion of what time it is for us and what we're supposed to be doing. We lost control of everything right now. And that is why it's important that we heal ourselves so that we can be able to heal the land. The land gives a sense of direction. Losing the land also contributed to identity crisis. When people are removed from their lands, that causes a sense of that has caused a sense of non-belonging and non-being. As people find themselves in different cultures and community, you can see that here in Tanzania on what some of the migrant labor did to many people, and before and still does that right now. People leave the rural areas to urban areas to work, and that changed part of their identities. It's said that because of all this control and this confusion that we find ourselves in, we as African people, sometimes we also play into the trap of the colonial setup. You know, I will give this an example. You see that when people, some of the people, when they come from the rural areas and they come to work here in the urban areas, they find a particular misplacement in themselves, and already they are being seen as stupid. And now they try to adapt to the city life, and after they adapted to the city life, that again caused another confusion to them when they go back home. Because when they go home, they struggle again to connect with the home space, the rural space, because now they have adapted another lifestyle. Going back to a home, they also have to adapt to that. And adapting to the lifestyle in the rural areas, it creates that crisis within themselves. And one of the things that we see right now happening with all this confusion is that some of the people that come from the rural area coming from the rural areas coming into the cities, when they go back to the rural areas, they have a tendency of doing certain things, of putting pressure on the people in the rural areas to make them want to be like them now, with the understanding that they come with from the urban areas. Or if they cannot do that, they get lost. I think this understanding, this analogy, you can it's presented very beautifully. Malidoma Some on his book of Water and Spirit, when he had all that experience of being kidnapped by the Catholic and lost the understanding of the rural practices. And when he went back into the rural areas, he was struggling to settle in the village. And that time that the elders knew that he needed to be initiated into the village ways of operating, or else he will it's either he will take over the village people, everyone in the village, or he will be lost in the village conduct of doing things, and that will create problems for him. And this is some of the things that we see happening in a lot of people right now. It's either when they get retrenched, they go back home, they get lost. And they got lost because they came into the urban cities because their land were taken. They don't own anything. They have to come to the urban places to come and work. They lost themselves. They go back. They're still getting lost, and we have a crisis. So healing the land. The land needs healing. When we heal the land, we also heal ourselves. But what is healing? Healing is a complex and multifaceted concept that can encompass physical, emotional, psychological, and even spiritual aspects of well-being. It generally refers to the process of recovering from illness, injury, emotional trauma, or any form of distress, with the ultimate goal of returning to a state of health. There are different types of healing individual: physical healing, emotional healing, psychological healing, spiritual healing, social and relational healing, healing of the self, cultural and traditional healing. And when we heal ourselves in all these different ways, we are also making sure that we are preparing ourselves to be able to connect with the land back, so that we can be able to heal the land. The land can also be able to heal us. So individual, all this type of healing, they are not isolated. When we heal our individual being, we are also making sure that we will heal the collective, and otherwise the healing also takes place from to everyone around. So what is healing the land? Healing the land refers to the effort of practices aimed at restoring and rejuvenating ecosystem and landscape that have been damaged or degraded due to various human activities or natural process. Healing the land is essential for preserving biodiversity, mitigating environmental problems, and ensuring that sustainability and natural resources. And there are also different ways of healing the land: ecological restoration, reforestation and afroforestation, wetland restoration, soil conservation, erosion control, urban greening, regenerative agriculture. And I think these are some of the things that Mabule was also talking about, seeing those disparities in the policy: conservation and land trust, indigenous land stewardship. You know, on this one, on the indigenous stewardship, many indigenous communities have traditional land management practices that prioritize sustainability and healing the land. Collaborative effort with indigenous peoples can promote effective land restoration. For some of us, when we grow up, we knew there was a process that the traditional leaders, they knew that it is important that every year the land needs to be cleansed. The land needs to be cleansed. The land needs to be cleansed with different herbs that the healers will also know, and go around the villages to cleanse the land of all negative energies that has taken place. And those are, you can imagine, just now, sometimes I think of right now when we live in Johannesburg, for example, or in this urban city, how many people die under the bridges? How many people die under different spaces, get stabbed in our township, get mugged? They live an energy of fear and a very not good energy. How many people get murdered and raped? And we continue with life as everything is okay. And these are some of the things that you realize that failure to see that we are violating the land by having these activities that are heavy, that are dark in their own process because people have died from that, and we continue to absorb them, and we see how they start working themselves even in our own environment, in our own families, in the whole society. The land, lefatshe la tlhatswiwa. But this is also the challenge of what kind of traditional leaders are we having right now that are supposed to be the ones that are taking the lead on this issue. Another one is the issue of education and outreach, raising awareness and educating communities about the importance of land healing and sustainable land management practices is crucial for long-term success. Some of us, we grew up being part of the nature conservation. They were calling it Lengau back in the Northwest. And in that, as young children, we learned how to connect with the land, the importance of the land, how to conserve our water, how to conserve, how to take